the reporting that matters the most and it doesn't have it's kind of half of the reporting. We now know some of the Rockets' intentions. We just don't know what it might amount to, but it is very, very interesting is that, in this post James Harden era where, Daryl Morey goes off to Philadelphia, Rafael Stone is promoted, longtime Rockets attorney and executive who's been in that position in the front office for, I think, 4 years now, 3.5 years. They hire Ime Udoka last summer. And in terms of their new operation and their culture and their kind of the way they function, Ime has just absolutely, put his imprint on the Rockets program from day one. We saw that with the way that with Rafael, they built the roster out in the summer. They take a pass on the James Harden reunion, which was telling in its own right that here's a guy who's, a former MVP, going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. Ime in particular was not feeling that. He wanted Fred VanVleet. Like on balance, one guy is far more accomplished than the other, but Fred, for Ime's purposes, fit what he wanted to do. They pick up Dillon Brooks. They were close to getting Brook Lopez. They thought they had him. That would have been a game changer. So a super interesting summer for the Rockets, and they're adding veteran talent, edgy, defensive-minded talent to the young core that they had. And what I think we now have learned is that, we have this breakout season from Sengun, who is clearly a foundational piece for what they're doing. And I'll be honest, and not to hit the rewind button too much, but man, the Stephen Silas era was obviously just one of those that will kind of be forgotten as they pivoted, during the post-Harden time. But I will say that, Sengun and what he is now compared to the kind of the part he had in the program under Silas is just vastly different. And Ime has pulled that out of him. I think he deserves credit for that. But Jaylen Green was the focus of the story that Kelly and Shams and I put together. And essentially that he's not seen internally as the building block, and that they have been open to not only talking about him, but looking at bigger names. They're star hunting, so to speak. So
what's Jaylen Green's value right now? Because, part of the reason that what you're saying has happened, which is them kind of maybe souring a little on his long-term ceiling, is because he hasn't played that well, right? I mean, he's shooting 41%, a very low efficiency, volume scorer who's not really going to help a ton on the defensive end. He'll have a highlight, but he'll have his 3 or 14 shooting nights. And he's going to be extension eligible this summer.
Right.
I feel like the Rockets' hope would be, he could be the centerpiece that, like you said, helps you go get a star. But is that, are they overly hopeful of what his value actually is right now on the open market?
Yeah, I think probably. And really, I mean, honestly, you guys know how this works. Sometimes, this kind of messaging getting out through the media, there's times when a team might hope that it helps at least spread the word. Their dream target that I definitely do not think is happening is Mikal Bridges, right? The idea of Mikal coming to the Rockets and a Jaylen center deal would make Ime and company very happy. And they're not only looking at a guy like that. I mean, they're trying to add bigs and just build out the roster. I think regardless of, or I guess without knowing what they're able to pull off, I will say in doing this piece that it did remind me that I find the Rockets, to be one of the most interesting non-contending teams in the league right now. They are, clearly have a vision of where they want to go, what they want to be. You see that win over the Lakers the other night when, every so often they just compete differently, honestly, than today's NBA. This is the scoring binge era where we've seen so much the last couple of weeks. And this is one of the few teams that will punch you in the mouth and piss you off and play a little more old school, which we don't see a lot of these days. And they're trying to build off
big
that.
Dillon Brooks guy, Sam Amick is.
I'm not, but he's had a pretty good, it's like its own version of a comeback player of the year award. I mean, you get cast aside in Memphis, and become, one of the guys that's a culture setter out there. It's been a good run for him so far.
Isn't it funny that
he got paid? But yeah,
I mean, I shouldn't say we all. I definitely did it. I definitely talked about Dillon Brooks going there, and that's the guy you want setting your culture. after everything they went out in Memphis, and like
Right.
the culture is totally different. Like you look at, they had one of the worst transition defenses. They had certainly the worst transition defense in the league the past 2 years. And you look at it now, they're like really good at it, and they get back. And some of that's Fred VanVleet, I'm sure. Some of that's Dillon Brooks, I'm sure. A lot of that's Ime Udoka.
Yeah,
obviously.
I think it's Udoka mostly, but yes, you're right. He
Yeah.
got his type of players.
But look, Dillon Brooks, you can say whatever you want about Dillon Brooks. That dude competes. Like he has never gone 90% on any play in his entire life. He is 110% on every single play.
I did not like his foul on Vanderbilt the other night, though, and I feel like that was lost in the whole situation because there was some stuff with him and LeBron that's always going to get some headlines, and like when Vanderbilt got ejected, like nothing actually foul happened in that sequence. But did you guys see the foul that Vanderbilt was mad about?
I didn't. I only saw the kind of the push of the head that Dillon
Vanderbilt's
did.
going up for a dunk, and Brooks pushes him. Like it's a light shove, but it's one of those that makes him fly into the stanchion, basically. And it reminded me a little bit. It wasn't as violent, or it certainly didn't have the injury impact. But remember the Gary Payton the second foul in the playoffs, where he clubs him around the head and Gary Payton breaks his elbow.
Don't get it twisted, Slater. I'm not trying to say he's not got a dirty element to his game.
Yeah.
I mean, he does, and I think also it's so telling that if you let's go back real quick and talk about Ime. Ime's one season in Boston was one of the most impactful for a head coach that I've ever seen. When you talk about a team that was already elite, you walk into a place that's got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, you get the trust of Brad Stevens at the time. And obviously everything that happened on the way out was as bad as it gets from a PR standpoint. But that season, he made a mark and convinced Jason and Jaylen to share the ball, to play differently, to have more edge, to compete differently. And that kind of mentality, which he at least partly picked up from Greg Popovich in his years in San Antonio. Ime was an average NBA player and defensive minded, put together whatever it was, 8-9 seasons. But as a coach, he's been the same guy from San Antonio, Philly, Brooklyn to Houston. And it's very telling when, you go out and one of the first moves you make is to go get yourself a Dillon Brooks. I mean, it said everything about the way Ime was going to build it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, that was his rep as an assistant. Like that was the way he came up. That was the way players talked about him. So it's not there were never any questions about Ime Udoka's basketball smarts or X's and O's after he had that season in Boston.
Right.
It was only about the stuff that went down off the court.
Sam, I mean, the story you guys wrote was interesting, even if nothing goes down over the next few weeks over the next week with the Rockets trade wise, because it's kind of painting a picture of like the leadership structure shifting, the priorities of the franchise shifting in some ways. But do you think something is potentially going to go down? I mean, do you think is this just the Rockets like hopeful? Yeah, sure. Like we're looking into things, or like could they? Do you think they might be like a stealth, like they really strike at the deadline and change something?
Nothing imminent, nothing hot right now. I mean, the openness to to kind of do something, the idea that once you get past Sengun and a few other guys that they're going to be open to talk, could lead to activity. But like you said, I think this one was more, I'm a sucker for these kind of pieces where you're basically admitting, all right, we don't know what they might do, but guess what? Here's what they're hoping to do. I mean, if we could have, to Kelly's credit, because he's got a good pulse on the team, if we could have a story like this, and you guys do this on your beats too, where you just tell people, here's what's on that whiteboard internally and what they are trying to put together, the wish list, if you will, because we all know we sit on pods like this and talk about what might happen. If you're in the offices with these teams, these are very real lists that get put together and the public never gets to see. So I don't know where it's all going to go, but the big takeaway is that the Rockets are trying to speed up their timeline here.
I have a question for you, Sam.
Yep.
What's a star to them? Like they're 11th in the West right now. What is a star? You say, okay, they might use Jaylen Green as a tool to go get a star. Obviously, we take Green, picks, whatever else. what's a star? Is DeJounte Murray a star, or is like an All NBA player?
Well,
star?
Mikal Bridges is the name he used, and that's probably like the threshold we're talking.
Yeah, but the Nets, from everything that everybody hears, like they're not trading him. Like the Nets are not trying to get worse.
For sure, but I think he profiles as like, a clear, delineation point, whatever, of like what the Rocket, right? They're not saying, hey, we're gonna go get Jason Tatum or something. It's like,
but there is a gap, and I think Fred, you're hitting on this. Is like, yes, there's a gap and a confusing disconnect, if you will, between the fact that Bridges, Rockets say yes, but Nets say no. Two other names that our information was that these do not entice the Rockets is DeJounte Murray and Zach LaVine. So okay, we have a yes and we have two no's. I don't know who sits in between. I don't know exactly who else they're looking at.